Underestimation is the birthplace of revelation. It's where the overlooked learn to build their own fire in silence. When people label someone as weak, unimportant, or incapable, they're not closing a story. They're unknowingly writing the prologue. Every dismissive word, every undercut glance, becomes fuel for transformation. What starts as a judgment turns into ignition, and the person written off begins to move differently. Not louder, not desperate, just sharper, steadier, more intentional. There's a strange kind of power in being underestimated. It strips away expectation, pressure, and spotlight. When no one's watching, mistakes become experiments. Failures become data. Growth happens quietly, like roots pushing through stone. Those who are overlooked learn to listen longer, observe deeper, and act when it actually matters. They become strategists, not showboats. They don't have to prove anyone wrong right away because they're not chasing applause. They're building endurance. People who are underestimated see the world through a different lens. They notice what others miss, the gaps, the blind spots, the subtle cracks in confidence. Because they've been dismissed, they know what it feels like to be unseen. That knowledge breeds precision. It teaches patience, emotional control, and a strange sense of calm in chaos. When everyone assumes you can't, you stop wasting time on performance and start focusing on preparation. By the time the stage lights finally swing your way, you're already 10 moves ahead. In history, innovation often came from people the world didn't expect much from. The inventors, artists, and leaders who were underestimated used that as insulation. It gave them the privacy to fail and the freedom to experiment. They didn't have to meet anyone's standard but their own. That's where originality lives, in the shadows of underestimation, where pressure is minimal and authenticity thrives. Greatness doesn't always grow in applause. Sometimes it grows in silence, in being doubted just enough to stay hungry. When someone calls you a tag-along, they're telling you something about themselves, not you. They're admitting they don't see depth. They assume your worth depends on visibility. But leadership isn't about volume or spotlight. It's about consistency, about showing up even when nobody claps. The underestimated know how to carry the mission when the hype fades. They've built resilience muscle by muscle, one ignored contribution at a time. Underestimation has a rhythm. It starts with exclusion, then doubt, then dismissal. But underneath all of that, a transformation is brewing. You learn to value your own voice, to trust your instincts, to create without needing validation. The underestimated person stops asking for entry and starts building their own door. It's not defiance, it's clarity. They realize that being doubted is temporary, but being self-defined is permanent. People underestimate what they don't understand. They look for confidence in loudness, talent in flash, leadership in hierarchy. They miss the quiet worker in the corner who's mapping out the next move. They miss the one who listens more than they talk. And when that person finally steps forward, when the results speak louder than reputation, the world experiences what revelation really means. It's the shock of realizing the person you counted out was the one holding the blueprint all along. Underestimation can hurt, but it also sharpens. It cuts away the ego and leaves only what's real: skill, purpose, and endurance. It forces you to ask hard questions. Why do I want this? Who am I doing it for? What will I do when no one believes in me? Those questions forge clarity. They strip the journey down to intent. Once you've walked through that fire, no amount of doubt can burn you again. Revelation doesn't happen by accident. It's born from all the small, unseen efforts made while people were too busy underestimating. Every unnoticed hour, every ignored idea, every quiet, "I'll show you," moment adds up until the balance shifts. When revelation finally comes, it doesn't roar. It arrives with the weight of inevitability. People call it sudden, but it's not. It's built, layered, earned. It's the long echo of persistence answering years of silence. Underestimation isn't the enemy. It's the forge. It's where you learn not to rely on validation, where you stop asking for a seat at the table and start building one. Those who have been underestimated know the value of patience. They understand that real change doesn't announce itself. It moves quietly until it can't be ignored. They've been invisible before, so they don't fear being unseen. They've already learned how to make impact without recognition. When the world finally turns to look, they don't need to adjust. They've been ready. While everyone else was talking, they were doing. While others sought credit, they built credibility. Underestimation gave them space to grow without scrutiny, to fail without being defined by failure, to learn without ego interfering. It's not a disadvantage, it's a disguise. And when it comes off, the revelation isn't just surprising to others. It's confirming to the one who's been waiting, working, and watching all along. True strength doesn't need permission to lead. It doesn't wait for applause or a title to move. It exists quietly, beneath the noise of recognition, working its way through action instead of approval. Strength doesn't announce itself with volume. It reveals itself in consistency, in the calmness that shows up when others lose direction. Real leaders are not the ones who step forward because they were told to. They step forward because they can't stand still when something needs to be done. There's a difference between authority and leadership. Authority can be given, but leadership can only be earned. You can hand someone a title, but you can't hand them trust. You can promote someone into power, but you can't promote them into respect. True strength doesn't wait for either. It leads by example, not position. It makes decisions rooted in purpose, not ego. It doesn't need validation to act because it knows that leadership is not about being followed. It's about making sure the right thing gets done even if no one claps for it. People often confuse confidence with loudness. They assume strength means dominance, control, or command. But strength is steadiness under fire. It's the ability to think clearly when panic is the easier choice. It's not about pushing others down to prove worth. It's about lifting the weight when no one else will. Real leaders don't need to tell you they're in charge. You feel it in their composure, their choices, their refusal to quit when things fall apart. They don't perform leadership, they live it. The world often measures strength in force. Who can shout the loudest, push the hardest, or demand the most? But that's surface strength. True strength runs deeper. It's the kind that bends instead of breaks, adapts instead of resists, endures instead of collapses. It's not fragile because it's not built on ego. When people who carry this kind of strength lead, they don't control through fear. They guide through example. Their power isn't in dominance, but in direction. Those who have real strength don't ask for permission because they already operate from responsibility. They don't wait for someone to assign them the role of a leader. They assume it because they recognize what needs to be done. They understand that leadership is less about being chosen and more about choosing to act when others hesitate. True strength recognizes urgency, not hierarchy. It doesn't pause to seek approval when the situation calls for courage. It simply moves, confident that doing what's right will speak louder than any title could. In every group, every mission, there's always that one person who steps up without being asked. The one who doesn't make a speech but starts doing the work. The one who keeps calm while everyone else argues. That's what real leadership looks like. Quiet initiative born out of conviction. It's strength that doesn't need to be declared. When everything falls apart, everyone instinctively looks toward that person. Not because they were assigned to lead, but because their strength makes people believe again. True strength also knows humility. It doesn't need to prove itself because it's already secure in its purpose. It doesn't chase control, it earns influence. When someone with real strength speaks, people listen, not out of fear, but out of trust. There's a gravity to their presence because they've shown through action that they won't break under pressure. They carry the weight others avoid, not to impress, but because they know someone has to. That's what separates those who lead from those who wait to be told what to do. Strength that seeks permission isn't strength. It's insecurity wearing confidence. The kind of power that needs recognition to act is fragile, temporary, and easily shaken. True strength doesn't need an audience. It doesn't seek validation before moving forward. It leads from conviction, not consensus. It knows that waiting for approval is how opportunities die. While others hesitate, true strength acts, adjusts, and moves again. Real leaders don't crave visibility. They crave progress. They're driven by purpose, not attention. They understand that leadership isn't about the spotlight. It's about the light you create for others to see the path. When they lead, people don't follow because they're told to. They follow because they trust the direction. That kind of leadership doesn't depend on charisma or authority. It depends on integrity. It's about doing what must be done when no one else wants to do it. True strength doesn't need to prove it belongs in the room. It walks in ready to contribute. It doesn't argue for validation. It acts with intention. It doesn't need to be announced as the leader. It earns that recognition naturally. When strength moves with purpose, permission becomes irrelevant. The results, the stability, the calm, those become the proof. People start to follow because they see reliability, not rhetoric. The world often overlooks those who lead quietly because they don't fit the traditional image of power. They don't command with their voices, they lead with their presence. But when the noise fades and the chaos settles, it's their steadiness that remains. That's the kind of strength that doesn't need permission to lead. It just leads, again and again, until the work is done. The quiet ones are often the game changers. They move differently, think differently, and act when others are still talking. While noise fights for attention, silence gathers information. The quiet ones don't compete for the spotlight because they're too busy studying the battlefield. They're observers first, strategists second, and executors when the time is right. They don't rush to speak because they understand that real power isn't in being heard. It's in knowing when to speak and when to move. In every room, there's someone who barely says a word, but their presence shifts the air. They don't interrupt, they don't argue, and yet, when they finally speak, everyone listens. That's not coincidence. That's credibility earned through restraint. The quiet ones don't waste words because they know words lose weight when overused. They let silence do the filtering, revealing what matters and who's really paying attention. Their strength lies in observation, in seeing what others miss because they're too loud to notice. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It means focused. It means someone who has learned that loudness doesn't equal leadership, and that volume often hides uncertainty. The quiet ones know how to read a room, how to spot patterns, how to notice shifts before they're obvious. They don't act out of impulse. They act out of understanding. That's what makes them dangerous in the best way. They can predict outcomes, sense pressure points, and move before anyone realizes they're already 2 steps ahead. There's a misconception that to make an impact, they already 2 steps ahead to be seen and heard constantly. But history doesn't back that up. Many of the world's most profound thinkers, inventors, and changemakers operated quietly. They weren't the loudest in the room. They were the ones who disappeared into their work. While others debated, they built. While others doubted, they refined. Their silence wasn't absence, it was preparation. They weren't invisible, they were focused. The quiet ones often hold back not because they lack confidence, but because they're filtering noise. They analyze. They test ideas in their minds before releasing them. They know that once you speak, you can't take it back, so they make sure every word has intent. This patience gives their decisions weight. When they finally act, it's not random. It's rooted in deep understanding. And that's what makes their impact last longer than the temporary flashes of loud ambition. Silence can be unsettling to those who don't understand it. People fill space with chatter because silence makes them confront themselves. But for the quiet ones, silence is power. It's a tool, not an absence. It allows clarity to surface. They use it to gather strength, to stay grounded while chaos spins around them. In a world obsessed with attention, the quiet ones master focus. They channel energy inward, not outward, which is why their results often speak louder than any words could. Being quiet gives them an edge in understanding people. They listen to tone, timing, hesitation, things that loud people overlook. They learn what motivates others, what scares them, what they avoid. This insight becomes strategy. While others talk about what they'll do, the quiet ones already know how they'll do it. They see the game from above because they're not distracted by noise. They don't just play to win. They play to understand the entire system. Quiet people are often underestimated, and that's their greatest advantage. No one sees them coming. They're dismissed as passive, until they make a move that changes everything. By the time the noise realizes what happened, it's too late. The quiet ones don't need to announce their wins. Their results announce them. They know that real power doesn't need to broadcast. It just needs to exist, steady and undeniable. Their calmness under pressure confuses people. When others panic, they stay still. That stillness isn't ignorance, it's control. They've trained themselves not to react emotionally, but strategically. While others are driven by urgency, they're driven by clarity. They know the difference between movement and progress, between speaking and saying something worth hearing. They don't rush to prove they're right. They wait until it's undeniable. The quiet ones change the game because they understand that visibility doesn't equal influence. Influence comes from consistency, from understanding timing, from acting with purpose when it counts. They aren't motivated by recognition, they're motivated by results. Their silence allows them to listen long enough to find the right moment. And when that moment comes, they move decisively. That's when everyone else realizes that the one they overlooked was the one holding the blueprint all along. The quiet ones don't lead with noise, they lead with clarity. They don't compete for attention, they create direction. They don't seek validation because they already know their worth. They understand that silence can build power the way stillness builds strength before movement. While the world talks, they prepare. While others look for recognition, they look for effectiveness. And when the time comes, they don't have to announce their arrival. Their impact does it for them. Respect is earned in moments, not titles. It's built in the small decisions, the quiet choices that no one sees, the way you handle pressure when it would be easier to break. Titles can introduce you, but how you act defines you. People might be told to follow someone with authority, but they only choose to respect someone with integrity. Respect doesn't come from position, it comes from proof. It's what happens when words and actions match, when character holds steady even when circumstances don't. A title might open doors, but only respect keeps them open. You can command obedience through fear, but not loyalty. Fear fades the moment the pressure shifts. Respect, on the other hand, roots itself in trust. It grows out of consistency, doing the right thing even when no one's watching. People notice how you treat them when you don't need anything from them. They remember how you handle those with less power. That's where respect begins. It's not granted by status, it's built by behavior. Moments define leaders more than their roles ever will. When everything's falling apart, when a decision has to be made that won't please everyone, when the truth is heavy but necessary, that's when respect is earned. Not because you have all the answers, but because you face the moment honestly. People can forgive mistakes. They can't forgive deception. They can handle hard truths if they come from someone who's real. Those moments reveal character, and character is the foundation of respect. Respect isn't something you demand, it's something you attract. The people who demand it the most are often the ones who deserve it the least. Real respect comes quietly. It follows those who take responsibility, those who show humility without weakness and confidence without arrogance. It's built by how you respond to failure, how you treat criticism, how you lift others without losing yourself. People respect steadiness because it's rare. They see who stands firm when things get messy, and that's who they follow. It's easy to hold respect when everything's easy. But when pressure hits, when choices test your values, that's when it either strengthens or shatters. The ones who keep their word when it costs them, who admit when they're wrong, who choose fairness over comfort, those are the ones people remember. Because in that moment, they prove they're not driven by ego or convenience. They're driven by principle. Titles fade, but moments like that last. They become stories people tell when your name comes up. The most respected people rarely talk about respect. They don't chase it, they embody it. They know it's not something you can force. It grows naturally from trust and time. You can't fake consistency. It either shows up every day or it doesn't. Respect comes when people realize they can count on you. Not just when things go well, but when everything's on the line. It's earned through reliability, through showing up even when there's no recognition waiting at the end. Sometimes, the smallest moments create the biggest impressions. The way you listen when someone else speaks. The way you own a mistake instead of deflecting it. The way you stay calm when others panic. People pay attention to those things more than they admit. Respect is built quietly through those patterns. It's not one grand gesture. It's 1,000 small ones stacked over time. When people look back, they don't remember what you said about yourself. They remember how you made them feel when it mattered. Power can demand attention, but only respect commands trust. A person can have authority without being respected, but never the other way around. Respect gives weight to your words, credibility to your actions, and value to your leadership. When people respect you, they'll follow you not because they have to, but because they want to. They'll trust your direction even when the path isn't clear, because you've shown through your choices that your compass doesn't shift with convenience. Respect is also reciprocal. You can't earn it by belittling others or using position to control. The strongest leaders are those who give respect freely, even to those beneath their rank. They treat everyone with the same level of humanity, from the highest office to the lowest role. That's how they build cultures where people feel seen and valued. Respect flows downward before it rises upward. When people feel respected, they naturally give it back. That's what builds teams that last and relationships that endure. Earning respect is a lifelong process. It doesn't come from one great achievement, but from the pattern of how you show up every day. It's the sum of every decision, every reaction, every choice to stay true when it would be easier to bend. People might forget your title, but they'll remember the moments when your integrity showed. They'll remember when you stood still in chaos, when you spoke truth against pressure, when you chose right over easy. Those are the moments that define how deeply you're respected, and they don't need a title to prove it. Every tag-along has a turning point. The moment when the background shifts, when the one who was overlooked starts to move differently, when the person everyone underestimated finally decides to stop waiting for recognition and starts earning it through action. It doesn't happen with noise or revenge. It happens quietly, like a fuse being lit. The tag-along learns to carry their own rhythm, their own sense of purpose, and somewhere along the way, the need to be accepted fades. They stop walking behind others and start walking toward something bigger. Being seen as a tag-along is both a burden and a gift. It hurts to be dismissed, to be told you're just there for the ride. But that pain can also sharpen you. It strips away illusions about who you can rely on and what validation really means. You learn quickly that no one is coming to hand you your moment. You have to make it. And once that realization settles in, something shifts inside you. You start doing the work not to prove others wrong, but to prove yourself right. That's where the turning point begins, not in defiance, but in self-ownership. The tag-along becomes the observer. While others rush to lead, they watch. They study. They learn patterns, strengths, and weaknesses. They pay attention to details that others miss because they're not distracted by ego. They see how people react under pressure, how decisions are made, how mistakes happen. All the while, they're building. Skill by skill, layer by layer, they start becoming capable in ways no one expects. And when the moment finally calls for action, they're ready, not because they've been told to lead, but because they've already been preparing for it in silence. Every person who's been counted out carries that quiet hunger. It's not the loud kind that demands attention, but the steady kind that drives persistence. It's the hunger to belong not through permission, but through undeniable contribution. The tag-along learns that no one is obligated to recognize them, and that freedom becomes power. They stop performing and start producing. They stop asking and start showing. They begin to realize that leadership isn't about being chosen. It's about choosing to act when everyone else hesitates. Turning points rarely come in comfort. They come in chaos, when things fall apart, when the people in charge freeze, when plans collapse, and everyone starts looking around for answers. That's when the tag-along steps forward. Not because they were waiting for applause, but because the moment finally caught up to their preparation. The others see it then, the calm in their voice, the clarity in their choices, the steadiness that comes from someone who's been building strength while being ignored. The tag-along stops following because they realize they've already been leading in mindset all along. This transformation isn't sudden. It's built from 1,000 small choices, staying late to learn, asking questions instead of pretending to know, taking criticism and using it instead of fighting it. The tag-along doesn't rush the process. They understand that their time will come when they're ready, not when others think they deserve it. And that patience becomes their superpower. While others chase validation, they chase growth. When the spotlight finally swings their way, they don't flinch. They've been rehearsing in the shadows long enough to handle it. The turning point isn't about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It's about alignment, the moment when ability meets opportunity. It's when the quiet effort that's been building for years finally meets the right moment. When that happens, the person who was once dismissed as just tagging along becomes the person others depend on. And what makes it powerful is that they don't need to announce it. The shift is visible through action, not attitude. People often overlook how essential the tag-alongs really are. They're the ones who notice the details that keep things running, the ones who stay consistent when enthusiasm fades, the ones who carry the quiet responsibilities others forget. They build discipline by necessity. Because they're not trusted with big roles at first, they learn to handle the small ones perfectly. That precision becomes their foundation. When they finally step into leadership, it's not because they've been chosen. It's because they've already proven they can handle what others took for granted. The turning point also teaches empathy. People who've been tag-alongs understand what it feels like to be unseen, unheard, underestimated. That experience shapes how they lead later. They don't overlook others the way they were overlooked. They recognize potential in the quiet ones, the hesitant ones, the ones standing in the back. They know how to spot the spark in others because they remember what it felt like when no one saw theirs. That's how cycles of leadership change, when the underestimated rise and make room for others like them. Every tag-along eventually faces a choice: stay in the shadow or step into their own light. The world might still see them as background, but inside, they've already crossed the line. Once that mindset shifts, there's no going back. They stop waiting for permission. They stop needing recognition. They start leading through action, through consistency, through purpose. Their turning point doesn't come with a grand announcement. It comes with quiet certainty. The same people who once called them a tag-along start asking them for direction, and that's when everyone finally realizes that the follower had become the foundation all along. Power shifts when names are finally remembered, when the ones who were invisible are suddenly spoken of with weight, when the forgotten names start to carry meaning, when the echoes of dismissal turn into recognition. That shift isn't just about fame or credit. It's about the correction of perception. It's the moment when the world realizes that the person they overlooked was the one holding everything together. Power has always existed in quiet places, but it changes form the moment acknowledgement arrives. Recognition transforms silence into influence. A name carries identity, story, and legacy. When people refuse to see you, they erase your name from the narrative. You become someone, they, or that person. But when your name is spoken, clearly, deliberately, with respect, it reclaims your presence. It places you in the story where you always belonged. That's what happens when power shifts. The narrative adjusts. People start to see not just what you did, but who you are. The name they ignored becomes the name they depend on. Being remembered changes the balance of every room you walk into. When they start saying your name, it means they've realized your value, maybe too late, but enough to shift how they move around you. The same people who once dismissed you now measure their tone. They hesitate before underestimating again. Because a remembered name carries proof, evidence of resilience, competence, and persistence. It's not just a label anymore. It's a symbol of everything you've done that couldn't be denied forever. For a long time, you might have worked in silence, doing the kind of work that rarely gets recognized. You might have seen others take credit or get attention while you stayed in the background. But names are patient. They wait for moments to align. The day your contribution becomes undeniable, your name stops being forgotten. And when it's finally spoken in places where it never reached before, it's not just acknowledgement. It's a shift in power. It's proof that consistency eventually rewrites perception. Power doesn't always come from taking it. Sometimes it comes from earning it so completely that it can no longer be ignored. That's what happens when names are remembered. It's not about demanding attention. It's about building such undeniable impact that people have no choice but to remember. Your name becomes shorthand for quality, for steadiness, for results. It enters conversations even when you're not there. That's the real power. Influence that travels without you having to push it. A name that was once forgotten can become a force that shapes decisions. The moment others start referencing you with respect, the dynamics shift. People start asking for your opinion, seeking your approval, measuring their choices by your standards. The same environment that once overlooked you now adjusts itself around you. This isn't just personal recognition. It's a rebalancing of value. The quiet persistence that once looked like invisibility turns into credibility, and credibility becomes authority. Names carry memory. They carry the story of what it took to get there. Every time your name is spoken with respect, it's a reminder of everything you endured to reach that point. The failures, the rejections, the moments when no one believed in you. All of it is contained in that sound. When people start to use your name as a reference for excellence, it's not just about achievement. It's about justice. It's the acknowledgement of work that was always worthy, finally being recognized for what it truly was. The power shift isn't about ego. It's about truth catching up. It's the universe balancing the equation between effort and recognition. The ones who built in silence finally take their place among those who shouted their way to visibility. And when that happens, the story changes for everyone watching. It tells others who've been overlooked that persistence works, that staying true to your craft eventually bends the world in your direction. That's why remembered names carry such weight. They become proof that quiet work matters. People start to move differently when they realize your name has meaning. They stop using it casually. They attach it to accomplishment. They start to say things like, that's their idea, or that's their style. It's not about ownership for vanity's sake. It's about acknowledgement that your work has an identity, a signature. Your name becomes a symbol of reliability. It starts to carry expectation, the kind that opens doors you used to knock on with no answer. The moment your name crosses into collective awareness, the balance of respect changes. Those who once spoke over you now pause to listen. Those who ignored your input now seek your perspective. It's not revenge, it's recognition. The same name they dismissed becomes the one they depend on to solve problems, to guide direction, to hold stability. It's the silent shift of power from those who assumed dominance to those who quietly built it. Power changes hands not through confrontation, but through the inevitability of competence. Every remembered name carries the story of someone who refused to disappear. It's proof that patience has power, that silence isn't surrender, that work done without applause still echoes eventually. When names are finally remembered, they don't just restore the individual. They redefine what leadership, credibility, and influence mean. The moment that happens, the power dynamic of the entire story changes, and it never shifts back again.